תגידו, יכול להיות שאנטישמיות, למעשה, מבטאת אמת עמוקה על התפקיד שיש ליהודים בעולם? האורח שלי היום, הרב רפאל שור, חושב שכן, והוא אפילו כתב על זה ספר. וקוראים לספר מי מפחד מהיהודי הרע, או באנגלית, שם הרבה יותר מגניב, Who's afraid of the big bad Jew. ומה ששור מציע זה בעצם הסתכלות הפוכה. במקום לראות באנטישמיות איזה משהו מטורף, לא רציונלי, לא, לא, לא. אנטישמיות זה דבר מאוד מאוד עמוק שמחדד את המסר החשוב שיש ליהודים לתת לעולם. והדבר הזה משמעותי הוא כי אנטישמיות היא לא התנגדות לעם, זה התנגדות למערכת ערכים שלמה. וכל פעם שתרבות מנסה להתנגד למערכת הערכים הזאת כדי לקבל יותר כוח, קודם כל היא תוקפת את היהודים בתור אלה שמייצגים את המערכת הזאת בצורה האותנטית ביותר. הדבר הזה מוביל למסקנה שלא משנה כמה ננסה להיטמע, וראינו בשביעי באוקטובר או בשמיני באוקטובר, זה לא יעזור. זאת הייתה שיחה מרתקת על איך על היסודות של האנטישמיות הגענו להיטלר, וגם על מה אפשר וצריך לעשות. האורח שלי, הרב רפאל שור, הוא רב ויוצר קולנוע קנדי, ישראלי. הוא יצר סרטים וספרים שנצפו במיליונים של צפיות. זאת הייתה שיחה מרתקת ממש, ואני מבטיח לכם שהיא תהפוך לכם את הראש. אז עכשיו, הרב רפאל שור, השיחה באנגלית, אבל יש כתוביות, אז בבקשה. Why do anti-Semites seem to understand Jewish power and influence better than the Jews themselves? And why was Hitler terrified of people who made up less than 1% of Germany's population? And why does the world's reaction to Jewish suffering follow patterns that make no logical sense unless there is something deeper at work? My guest today has the answers. His name is Rabbi Raphael Shor, filmmaker behind documentaries like Obsession and Relentless, that have reached 100 million viewers and are used by the NYPD for training. While most Jews were shocked by October 7 aftermath, Shor saw it coming. He had been warning about rising anti-Semitism for years. His new book, Who is Afraid of the Big Bad Jew, makes a provocative argument. That Jew hatred actually reveals profound truth about Jewish identity and mission that Jews have forgotten. Rabbi Shor, welcome and thank you so much for coming today. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on your show, Rועי. Nice to meet you.
My honor. Before we start the show, Rabbi Raphael Shor is an Israeli Canadian. Can we conduct this interview in Hebrew?
I think we'll be much more successful in English.
Okay. So it is good that I prepared everything in English, okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I think, and this is my first question, you have written films and documentaries for over 15 years warning about rising anti-Semitism, yet you say you weren't surprised by October 7. Now, many Jews, however, were shocked by the global response that followed. And my first question is, what does this tell us about the Jewish community's relationship with reality versus wishful thinking?
That's your small first question, huh?
Let's to get yes.
Just to warm things up.
Yeah, just to warm
Okay.
things up.
Okay. Oh, that is such a deep, deep question that is going to encompass our entire discussion for the hour. But I will start off by saying this. Actually, I've been making documentary films for 20 years. And the first films that I came up with, you mentioned Relentless. That was the first one. It was Relentless, the struggle for peace in the Middle East. And it was to expose the fallacy and the stupidity of the Oslo peace process. This was in I don't remember when it was. I'm bad with years, but it was around 2000, even 1995 or something. The idea when 80% plus of the Jewish community, even in Israel, were supportive of the Oslo peace process. I was watching the conversation happening in Arabic because it's available. Not that I speak Arabic, but I was able to access it. And I saw what Arafat was saying, and I saw what their intention was. but the rest of the Jewish people were not. And that's why it pertains to your question. My strength and why I've been a successful filmmaker and now writing my first book is that I'm listening to what the other side has to say. For some odd reason, which I can put my finger on also, the Jewish people have not been very good at listening to what the other side is having to say about them. And I think that that has to do with 2,000 years of persecution. I mean, we'll get into it. I'm trying to give a fairly short answer so that we can go in various directions. But simply put, the Jewish people, after having been stomped on, disparaged, beat up, put in ghettos for 100 to 2,000 years, our psyche has been thoroughly messed with. And we've lost our moral self-confidence. And as a result, it skews our ability to see reality straight and make the kind of decisions we should.
And again, what you said, and I think it is very important to say it over, the idea that Jews have the tendency not to listen to the other side or to their enemies. And I think the Hamas charter is a great example, is a very good example. This is not the answer. We want to know why Jews have the tendency not to listen, and what you say was a persecution over 2,000 years of exile. So, the
I have a
bef
good
be, yes,
I have a good anecdote that relates to
yes,
that as well, because it's not the Hamas charter. Even worse, it was the PLO charter and the PA charter that we established peace with. So they were
mm,
supposedly the moderates and Hamas the extremists, but the PLO had the same charter to destroy Israel. And my first film, I had a lot of arguments with very far left-wing Jewish people from abroad, and they would say, how can you say in the film that the PLO charter was not changed? Because it wasn't legally changed. And in the end, I brought 10 different proofs that it wasn't changed legally. Finally, the thing that shut me up was he went to the Israeli Foreign Ministry website where it said there that the PLO had changed their charter. And they hadn't, but it brought it from the Israeli Foreign Ministry website. And what am I going to say
ah,
now? What am I
oh,
going to say now? So that shows just
mm,
how far. I mean, we were lobbying for Arafat. We were fawning over Arafat. That's how bad it was. It wasn't just that we weren't hearing it. We were whitewashing and supporting and
and fighting. I
fighting
think
for him.
yes. You know, now my second question, and again, I want to dive in into your book, and this is like a broad overall question. I think that your book's central thesis is that anti-Semitism reveals something profound about Jewish identity and mission rather than just being random hatred. I have read the book Why the Jews by Dennis Prager several times, and I think he makes a very nice point. It is not, it is something about the Jews, specifically about the Jews. And you write in your book, one thing we can learn from anti-Semite is that Jewish people matter. After all, insignificant people and states are not despised, they are ignored. And in this context of, wokeism and progressivism, and, how do you even say that we are better than anyone else? How should this reframe how Jews think about themselves and the role in the world?
Yeah, well, again, this has to do with our ability to explore what we are. And I think the first question is, who are we and what does the anti-Semite think we are? First, let's explore that. If it ends up that we realize from these discussions that, wow, they're saying something special about being Jewish, let me deal with that secondarily. Let's not say, oh my gosh, they think we're special. How am I going to deal with that? No, let's first understand what's going on. And what I show in my book, which relates to the mistakes that we've made in the last 25, 30 years with the peace process and misunderstanding the radical Islamists' aim to destroy the Jewish people, is that we've misunderstood Adolf Hitler as well. So I have an entire chapter in my book where I explore the ideology of Adolf Hitler. And this is like you said in Prager's book. Prager just gave it the term the de-Judaization of anti-Semitism, which is a brilliant idea and also requires going into depth. The meaning of it is that we've somehow said, yes, they've hated us for 2,000 years, but only because they needed somebody to blame. They needed a scapegoat, or things were difficult at those times, or it was random. It just happened to be we were at the wrong place at the wrong time. No, that's not what anti-Semitism is about. And how do we know it? At least from the Holocaust, the worst crime against any people in the history of humanity, Adolf Hitler, the perpetrator, had a completely clear ideology of why he wanted to wipe us out. And that ideology has been completely ignored by academia and by the mainstream to the extent that I'm revealing it in my book, and it's a surprise to people.
No,
But it's completely clear in his writings, and I'll be happy to share what the ideology is. But it's that's the starting point. Is like, wow, we completely missed the reason the Holocaust happened. It's so fundamental.
now you say in your book, and it's a somehow controversial argument, but if you think about it thoroughly, it makes it makes sense that Hitler was a rational anti-Semite with a coherent real worldview. He wasn't simply a madman. And again, the fight was ideology between National
Hmm.
Socialism and the Jews. And you also say, and this is basically from the book, that Hitler ideology was based on social Darwinism from Herbert Spencer, the belief that the survival of the fittest should govern human societies through struggle and conflict. And Hitler saw the Jews as the primary enemy because they had introduced the opposing value. And you can take Nietzsche like the morality of the slaves, etc. The idea of humanism, compassion, equality, morality. And according to Hitler, Jewish idea has infected European civilization throughout Judaism, Christianity, and Marxism. Could you please elaborate on
Yeah.
why this struggle is so profoundly important?
Yes, 100%. Well, you did a good job summarizing it. The only thing I want to correct you on is that this was Hitler, not me, Hitler saying that he was a rational anti-Semite. He said it. And and he said that the entire war was an ideological war between the Jews and the Germans. Now, we have heard some of these statements, Hitler saying the greatest poisoner on the planet is the Jewish people. And we've been trained, we've all been brainwashed to think, this shows us what a madman he was. He's so crazy, he's paranoid, he thinks the Jews are such a threat. We also know the weird phenomena that in 1944, Hitler kept trains going to carry out the genocide against the Jews rather than using those trains and the logistics to help win the war. These things are interpreted as uh, examples of irrationality, when in fact, if we re-understand it based on Hitler's ideology, it was completely rational. Hitler's main goal, according to him, was to redefine human morality and human ideology. And he said there was a conflict, one major conflict of human history, and that was between the humanistic ideas and the idea of power and might makes right. And in that conflict, he believed might makes right, social Darwinistic ideas were not only the right ideas, but necessary for human development and human evolution. If you take away those ideas, if you take away the struggle, the selection that happens as a result, the weak are pushed aside, the strong survive. That leads to the evolution of humanity. And if you take it away, those principles away, and everybody's living equally and in peace, so now the system for development of humanity is destroyed. Hitler looks around in the 20th century and he says, we are in trouble. We civilization, we, Germany, are in big trouble. You know why? Because the humanistic values have taken control. They're dominating the idea of love and peace and human rights and equality and dignity of man. These ideas had taken hold. So Hitler says, wow, we're in big trouble. Humanity's in big trouble. I need to reset the morality of the world. Now, in order to do that, I need to destroy those people who are bringing that morality into the world. Number one, the Jewish people. And because we brought them into the world, but even more than that, he considered that it was Jewish spiritual DNA that even if we weren't educated with these values, we were going to bring humanistic values into the world. So that's why Hitler was determined to wipe us out because it was an ideological war of the values that we brought into the world.
I I would like to mention two things with your permission. One is the concept of the Jewish DNA. Basically, Hitler believed that Jewish ideas were embedded in Jewish DNA, making every Jew a threat regardless of their personal beliefs. And this is a very strong claim. And the other thing is that his beliefs and ideologies were not created in a vacuum. If you look at the work of
Correct.
Francis Galton, for example, the idea of eugenic and dysgenic, the idea is that we need to make better genes for ourselves by, mating properly,
Hmm.
not just with horses and other mammals, but with humans as well. Okay, so those ideas were in the atmosphere in the beginning of the 20th centuries, and also in the United States. For example, the uh, sterilization laws, that if you take a feeble-minded man or a woman and you take their ability to have children, those laws were practiced in the US. So
Yes,
it wasn't in a vacuum that Hitler created his theory.
correct. In fact, these ideas of social Darwinism came into European parlance in the 1850s, right around the time of Darwin. And the idea said that just like the animal kingdom is just is developed through natural selection, so also is humanity. Meaning fundamentally, humanity is an animal and develops the same way. Whereas the Jewish people have brought into the world the idea that humanity is not another animal. We have an animal side, but we have a soul. So these are fundamentally different worldviews. And Hitler put his finger on it and said the Jews are the ones bringing it into the world. But you're right. That, therefore, anti-Semitism based on these ideas, and Nietzsche was part of this process in the late
Mhm.
1800s. These were widely accepted ideas in Germany. There was the League of Anti-Semites. Hitler just made it into a political platform and succeeded in taking it to the end, as I said, by being a rational anti-Semite. That's why he defined himself as rational, because he's taking it to the logical conclusion. And the only logical conclusion was to wipe out every single Jew because they represent this ideology in their soul. He was going to wipe out Christianity too. I talk about that as well, but he didn't have to wipe
Mhm.
out every Christian because it's not in their soul, in
There
his
is a
view.
book called IQ, A Good History of a Bad Idea. And in the book, basically, it says that what the Nazis did into the sterilization laws conducted and convinced in the US was basically taking them to the logical extreme, exactly in
Yeah,
those words.
yeah,
So I think you're
yeah.
absolutely right. Now,
He saw.
there
I'll
is,
just
yes.
share with you two sides of this also. The SS was a part of the natural selection process. The SS, they were the highest level um, troops of the Nazi movement. They were self-selected. Who they had to marry was self-selected. They were breeding the highest level of Germans on the one hand, and then they had a euthanasia campaign where the German Nazis killed 70,000 Germans in a program like you just defined to get rid of the weak. So they were by design controlling this evolutionary process, and they knew they had to get rid of the Jews completely. if they were going to establish the Thousand-Year Reich on these old pagan principles that the Jewish people had disrupted.
And I want to remind everyone that those ideas still live with us today. When you bring your girlfriend and your Jewish mother say, she's not for you, she's basically practicing eugenics approaches. You need better genes, okay? So
That's
I
a good
want us to
point.
keep it. I want us to keep it in mind. Now, one of the most striking claims is that Hitler and Judaism are mirror images of each other. Both recognize the same fundamental human struggle, but choosing opposite sides. And you write, the Nazi believes that spirituality dehumanizes men, while Judaism holds, but while Judaism holds that men humanize the universe. And please, now you touched upon it briefly, but can you please elaborate on the philosophical battle and why it continues today?
Well, this goes back to the Chumash. The greatest example of it comes from our Torah, which is when Rivka had twins in her tummy, and she had Yaakov and Esav, and they were doing battle already before they were born. And when Esav passed a house of idol worship, he was running to get out. And when Yaakov passed a house of worship, he was running to get out. And Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch explains the psukim there, where it says there she's having two nations, two ideologies, because there's two lasonot that are defined there. So it's not only two nations, but two ideologies that are coming into the world that are going to be fundamentally at odds with each other. And this is the struggle of human history. And that's why it's brought right there in the beginning of the Chumash, whether humanity is going to recognize its divinity, its spirituality, whether humanity is going to attempt to rise above their physical animal nature and develop holiness, kedusha, or whether they're going to remain a part of the animal kingdom. So this is not only the struggle of all of human history, but this is the struggle of every human life. Every one of us is struggling with our body and our soul in our life. Are we going to rise above our animal instincts and become more human, more compassionate, more loving, even though it's difficult to conquer the bodily impulses? So when God created the world, he created the world with humanity, with a challenge that is the entire purpose of life, the free will challenge. And he put in the Jewish people to bring the light into the world. He gave us the Torah to bring the light into the world. And the resistance to that light, the resistance to that push towards becoming more human is called anti-Semitism.
Okay. Now, I want to take it to again to the two nations, the two ideologies, and to the message that Judaism holds today. Now, before I do, I'm going to warn you in advance, okay? There is a scholar, an Israeli scholar named Avi Ravitsky, very famous scholar in the world of Judaism, and he always says, when Judaism writes a book, I will love to read it. Okay, and the idea, who speaks for Judaism? So my question is, I have a question, but later on, immediately, I'm going to ask you: when you say Judaism, do you speak for yourself? Do you speak for the modern Orthodox in Canada? Do you speak for the modern Orthodox in Israel? Do you for uh, uh,
Hmm.
this is very important. Who is the we that we are talking about? Now, uh, what is, as far as you concerned, the Judaism message? Because it can be, God, family, and country, like the American conservative, or something beyond. And do you see any greater message of the Jewish civilization on the level of the biblical values of the prophets, something in the magnitude of the message the Bible holds, but for the 21st century?
Yes. First of all, you've asked me two gigantic questions here. So allow me perhaps to answer the second one
Yes.
first, but I'd be happy to go back to the first. Um, my entire purpose in writing this book was to communicate the larger vision of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people, because my purpose is not to reveal the real reason there is anti-Semitism, the real reason why Jews are hated. I mean, that's a mitzvah. I'm helping people get clarity. That's a nice thing. We've been
Mhm.
very confused about it. It's an important thing, and it's very insightful. But that is not the purpose of my book. The purpose of my book is to flip it on its head and to say the anti-Semites understand us very often better than we ourselves understand us. And through the eyes of the anti-Semites, we come to the conclusion that they understand our importance. And then, like you said before, I then bring the the inverse of the anti-Semite, which is Torah. I'll go back to your first question soon, but it is Torah. The Torah says, the Gemara, the Talmud, brings that at Sinai, Sin'ah came into the world. The play on the words that I don't need to explain to Israelis. Sinai, Sin'ah,
But no, we are
that,
not just dealing with Israelis. Sinah also mean hatred. The idea, because
right, exactly.
some of our audience is not Israeli.
Right. So at Mount Sinai, Sinai, Sin'ah, which is the play on that word Sinai, Sin'ah, which means hatred in Hebrew, came into the world. When God gave to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, when he revealed himself in the first and only national revelation of God's message to humanity, of why he created the world, what is the purpose of humanity, and how to accomplish the mission of mankind. When he gave that role and that mission to the Jewish people became hated. That's the source of anti-Semitism. So what the Torah says is the exact same thing that Adolf Hitler says, that it is a rebellion against the Jewish system of morality, the holiness that we are imposing on the world, the demand for humanity to become more. And the resistance to that is Jew hatred. And so my purpose in the book is then go beyond that. That's step one. Step two is, hello, Jewish people. This is who we are. This is who we are. There's a lot inside of us that does not want to hear that message. There's a lot
Yeah,
inside that does
definitely.
not want to hear that message. We would prefer to be invisible. We would prefer to be like everybody else.
עם ככל
But guess
העמים.
what? But guess what? It didn't work out that way. And so my message is let's be who we are. Let's embrace it because there's going to be Jew hatred anyways. We're not going to solve it, but we can be who we are meant to be. So let's find out who we are. Let's learn about what it means to be Jewish. Let's learn what it means to be a holy nation. Let's embrace it. Let's love it. If we love it, we will understand the world better. We will live a meaningful life and we will do our mission as the Jewish people. So that's my bigger message in the book is let's do our mission.
And again, I want, with your permission, to weigh in. I said it in a lecture yesterday. You know, one of the features of the liberal age is your ability to choose your own identity. We are not restricted by forced identities, by traditions and culture, etc. You can choose and change your own identity. And I think that prior to October 7, many secular Israelis were had to choose between what are you more, an Israeli or a Jewish.
Hmm.
They picked the Israeli as a something that
Hmm.
that was chosen and was not forced upon them. And after October 7, when the forced Jewish identity was forced back on the table, and you cannot escape your your fate. Okay,
Yep.
once you cannot
Yep.
many people now considers, you know, I used to think of myself as first and foremost an Israeli, but now I changed my mind. Now I think that I'm first and foremost Jewish, and I think that what you said is very powerful, which leads me to, okay, so who is your target audience? The people of Israel, the secular people of Israel, the national
Hmm.
Orthodox, because what you say resonates with my own beliefs. But I don't
Right.
know, and even I suspect that it will not resonate with secular liberal people or secular
Right.
liberal Jewish Israeli people, for example.
Right. Well, I, as I mentioned at the beginning, as you mentioned, this is my first book. You know, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew is my first book, but I've made 20 documentary films, full-length feature documentary films. So I actually made a companion film with this book called Tragic Awakening, A New Look at the Oldest Hatred. And I've been going around America and Canada and various places, even in Israel, the past 7 months, showing this to non-religious audiences, non-religious Jewish audiences, as well as non-Jews, non-Jewish audiences. And I've been impressed that it resonates very deeply. And I think the reason is because the same reason you just explained that that challenge, that choice that Israeli Jews were making, it's the same thing with the diaspora Jew. They were in the same thing. They were assimilating. It was a little less conscious. They were just assimilating and being not really Jewish. And after October 7th, they call themselves October 8th Jews. It's a phenomenon that they realized that they're Jewish. My nephew was on campus at NYU. The entire campus hates his guts. Here he is, an assimilated Jew, and he's been to Israel a few times. He likes Israel, but he's not religious. He's not involved. He's not going
It
to
doesn't have an
Hillel.
Israeli passport. He's not an
He doesn't have
Israeli.
Israeli
He cannot
passport.
speak
No.
Hebrew.
No Hebrew, doesn't go to Hillel for Shabbat, not involved in anything. And all of a sudden, after October 7th, he is a Jew. They reminded him that he is a Jew. And the phenomenal, interesting thing was that the Jews responded with pride. Yes, I'm Jewish. And that is a soul-based, that's a neshama-based response, that most Jews have. And it is because this phenomena I describe also in another chapter of Torah-based thought in my book that God put this tool into the world if once he established the Jewish people as a necessary tool for humanity to reach its fulfillment, he had to have a mechanism what to do because he also created free will. What do you do when the Jews use their free will to disappear and to stop being Jewish? So God created a mechanism in this world, which is the non-Jews will remind them, which is called anti-Semitism. And so that's what happened after October 7th. So we need to embrace the reminder. And so therefore, to answer your question, I believe that every Jew needs to see this film, and I mean religious and non-religious, because I think everybody, to some degree, has lost uh, the core message of what the Jewish people are supposed to be doing in our role. It's not just for the religious. It's not we're doing mitzvot. We're doing our commandments and being religious. We need to be a special people with a national mission, with a spiritual mission in the land of Israel, and humanity needs us to do that.
And so I might missed it, but again, what is the message of Judaism today? The idea that we need in the land of Israel to construct what we call Mamlechet Kohanim and Goy Kadosh, to construct a modern country that will, connect heaven and earth, and what does heaven and earth connection encapsulate? What does it mean? Nechama Leibovich, the great uh, Parshanit, I don't know how you called it, the idea of,
Commentator,
yeah, the great commentator on the Torah said, if you want to be kdoshim to you, if you want to be holy, you don't give your paycheck 2 months after the show, okay? And you don't use bureaucracy to manipulate you. You make the institution, the national institutions, the state institutions in the spirit of being Kedoshim. Do you
right?
mean this or do you mean something else?
No, I mean that. I mean that. Rev Cook talks about this a lot as well. And I think it begins with love. I think it begins with tolerance. I think that Yisrael, we need to be brothers. I'm not advocating that somehow everyone needs to become religious overnight and become an observant person. I think we're a very special, beautiful people as we are, and there is so much spirituality and drive for goodness. I think Hitler recognized it, and I think it is there. And I think that we need to unify around this common vision of being a unique people. And we have it deep in there. I think even Ben Gurion would talk about being, a special people, a high level of morality. And yes, to invest, ultimately, it means investing all of our institutions and all of our government with Torah values and therefore enlighten ourselves and live in a beautiful society with love and peace and respect. And that will be a model society for humanity. And it will be a blessing. We will be a blessing for all of humanity.
In the ideal Jewish state, in the ideal modern Jewish state that you see in your vision, do you have any notion regarding, whether it being a capitalist or socialist or communist or because many of the founders of the Communist Party of the communist movement like Marx and etc., many other Trotsky were Jewish, where they seeked for the values of compassion, and they didn't find them in Beit HaMidrash. So they went on to being communist
Hmm.
and the Communist Party. But now 100 years after the atrocities of Lenin and communism,
Hmm. Hmm.
what do we know about? Okay, let's say that I want my modern Jewish state to be like a pinnacle for the world. Do we even have the tools to understand how to operate a modern state in the context, for example, of economy?
Well, I'm quite sure that we don't have it all figured out right now, and I think we need to work together, put our great minds together, and with the Torah to try to figure out the right way. But the reason it is so complex and challenging is because Judaism is nuanced, Torah is nuanced. So Torah does say freedom as an ultimate value, owning property, and therefore capitalism as a supreme value. And at the same time, help the poor and help the weak and make sure that you're not abandoning people at the same time. So Judaism demands us to hold opposite ideologies together. What's happened in the history of humanity is one side has taken control and left behind other sides of those values, and that leads to evil and that leads to a mess. The religious Jews in America, for example, they're on the sidelines of history. Emil Fackenheim, the philosopher, talked about the re-entry of the Jewish people into history. The Jews in America, even the religious Jews, they think they're doing everything they're supposed to do as Jews because they keep the mitzvahs and they keep Shabbat. But if they're not coming to Israel and being part of the Geula after 2,000 years of exile, when Hakadosh Baruch Hu, God is giving us an opportunity to restart our national enterprise as a nation, as a society, carrying out these values in our land, they're missing the point also. So I think it's complex. I think the Torah asks us to carry both. At the same time, I can share with you, like, I definitely lean to the right on most of these political issues, but Judaism demands us to be compassionate at the same time as we're being capitalistic.
And there is a saying, I don't know how you translate it to English because it loses a point, that Judaism hates ism. We hate
Right.
communism, capitalism, socialism,
Right.
can, but now we
Right.
have Judaism, so it doesn't work. But I think what you just said about the American Jews right now uh, is one of the reasons why Rabbi Cook is an unimportant figure in the American Orthodoxy, because
Right,
according to
right.
Rabbi Cook, after the state of Israel was conceived, or we can return to the land of Israel, there is no place for the Jews of the diaspora. The story only continues in the land of Israel. Therefore, the Torah or the philosophy of Rabbi Cook has no message to
Right.
the Jews in the diaspora.
Well, they don't want to hear it. That's
Yes,
better. They don't want to hear
yes,
it. So don't teach me that. Yes, exactly.
yes.
And
Now, yes.
let me share with you. Go back to that other question by using it as an opportunity to share with you a little bit more about me and my background. You see, I am a Baal Tshuva. I'm a Choser b'Tshuva. I did not grow up religious. I grew up in
This was
Canada.
my next
That was your
question.
next
Just
question. Okay.
wow, wow,
Okay.
about your
Okay.
background.
Okay, okay. So I did not. I grew up a proud, identified Jew, but I grew up Ben Goyim, amongst the non-Jews. There was 10 Jews out of 1,000 in my high school in a small Canadian town. I grew up. I knew I was Jewish, but it was a cultural thing. But I went to Hebrew school until I was age 13, and it was horrible. It was a bad experience. It was terrible teachers and terrible education. So by the time I'm 13, I know that Judaism's irrelevant. Right? And so I go and live my life, and I'm dating non-Jews, and I'm living my life, but I did come to Israel. I went to camps, and I became excited about Israel, and again, proud Jew. But then at age 18, my twin brother ended up in yeshiva in Yerushalayim, Eshet Torah, and he became religious. I thought he was crazy. 2 years later, while I was almost finished university, I came to get him out, to save him from being in the yeshiva and show him the folly of his ways, his mistaken ideology. But then I was shocked and I saw,
You
wow,
got trapped
Judaism.
in the
I got
cult.
trapped. Exactly. And the reason I did was because I was introduced for the first time to Torah and to Judaism that was sophisticated, that was intelligence, that was rational, that was meaningful, and it was shocking. I didn't because I had not been taught that. And I think that's a story for a lot of people. So then now I had already liked Israel. Now I'm connecting to my Judaism. Now I decide I'm going to make Aliyah. Why? Because I didn't know who Rev Cook was. I didn't know. I'm connecting it back to what you said. I didn't know who's Rev Cook. I never touched a Rev Cook for 20 years after that. But I'm doing my tefillah 3 times a day, right? And the tefillah says the kabetz galuyotenu, right? Jewish people. So I'm praying, bring us back to the land of Israel. It was obvious to me this is the homeland of the Jew, and after 2,000 years, we're presenting the opportunity to come back. It was obvious to me that this was the thing that I'm supposed to do as a Jew, to be part of my people, rather than remaining in exile as a guest, where I knew, because I had some anti-Semitic experiences, where I knew that I was a guest, and ultimately human Jewish history means everywhere we're going to get kicked out. It's just a question of when and how. So I cut to the chase, in the Monopoly game, go directly past go, and came to Israel. But subsequently, I learned about Rev Cook and realized that this is the beautiful time in history where we can actually accomplish our mission so close to the Geula. And I realized that through anti-Semitism, we can get a lot of clarity on who we are and what we're supposed to be doing.
Now, I would like to ask you two questions regarding your story. One, would you say that your story is very similar to what Alan Dershowitz describes in his book, The Vanishing of the American Jew? Basically, that Judaism is irrelevant for the modern educated boys or modern educated youth in America these days?
I'm not exactly familiar with what he says in that book, but I would say that it's irrelevant only because the teachers have
Yeah,
made
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah, yeah.
irrelevant. Yeah,
The
in other
teacher
words, the
made it
teachers,
irrelevant. The
yeah,
last time that you encounter a rabbi is in your bar mitzvah, and you are not they don't let you to meet with sophisticated writing like Rabbi Jonathan Sachs and Rabbi Eshel,
Right,
etc., etc. You know, I
right,
just want to mention that Martin Luther King called Rabbi Heschel his rabbi,
right, right.
President Obama has had the books of Rabbi Heschel in the Oval Room. And now my second question regarding your background, and your father was a Canadian member of parliament. Your brother is a prominent in American television, and you grew up assimilated and upper class in Canada. And I think upper class is important in the context of my questions. Now, many Israelis and rabbis struggle to connect with Jews from backgrounds like yourself, or to encourage them to take their Jewish heritage more seriously. Often, those Jews support progressive causes, even those that sometimes seems too hostile to Jewish interests. BLM, for example. Okay. Now, given your
Hmm.
outreach work at Open Door Media, what do you think Israel need to understand in order to connect with and inspire Jews like yourself or like what you used to be to become more engaged with Judaism, with their own heritage?
Right. So it's a very good question. First of all, there's a distinction, people have made. I would call myself upper middle class. We were not wealthy. We were not wealthy. At
I'm
the same
sorry, I'm
time,
sorry.
but we were above average. My father was an accountant, and then he became a leader in the community and became a member of parliament. Um, my brother's done well as the creator of the TV show House and The Good Doctor. He's now the category of wealthy. Um, I consider myself today very wealthy because yesh li kol, because I have everything I need thanks to Kodesh Baruch Hu. But the thing that people, I think Israelis need to understand, and what I'm trying to do with Open Door Media, which is the largest, I founded this company, which is the largest educational media company in the Jewish world, where we create content about Israel and Judaism and share it on YouTube through our channel Unpacked. And we have podcasts. We have the most popular podcast called Unpacking Israeli History. And what people need to know is that most Jews, and I think this applies to Israelis as well, their disconnection is almost entirely a result of a bad education or a lack of education. To the extent that we can provide young Jews with a meaningful Jewish experience, a meaningful Jewish education, and articulate the idealism and the spirituality that is inherent in our religion, even though it's not a religion, even though in our Torah and even our way of life, in our Shabbat and everything that we do, I think that people can get inspired, but we haven't shared it. And as a result, to the extent that Jews do not have it, then they become subjected to the pressures of an alien society, of a society that doesn't like Jews so much. And then subconsciously, you're assimilating, and ultimately, for the idealists amongst those, they'll become anti-Israel in order to prove that they are not Jews.
And this is exactly what we strive to do on our podcast, you know, bring the best intellectual from all over the world to discuss philosophy, science, theology, artificial intelligence in uh, uh, in the light, sometimes in the light of Judaism. You don't always get, you know, to connect things to Judaism when you're speaking about, you know, abstract math. But again, Judaism can hold a very solid way of thinking, a very solid philosophy, a very deep understanding of the universe. And if
Right.
you present it correctly, and if you're not ashamed of your identity, and your identity can be meaningful to people of the 21st century in 2025, I think it does make a difference.
I agree with you 100%. And I think it's just a question of how to reach people in this busy world, and they're worried, oh, you're trying to make me religious. They're worried about that. But almost every young Jew is idealistic. Almost every young Jew is spiritual, even if they're not necessarily labeling it God. They want to make the world a better place. These are all Jewish core values. It is who we are. But now, if we don't present it to them, so they go to Buddhism for their
Mm.
spirituality. They go to progressivism for their idealism. And it's just because we, the Jewish people, the Jewish establishment, have left them in a vacuum. I just want to also say, though, it's not easy. It's like you be critical of these young Jews for being assimilated, and we can be critical even more of the ones who stand against Israel. But at the same time, we can be compassionate that they weren't given the backbone and the spiritual knowledge to have moral self-confidence, and therefore they were left swimming in a sea. And at the same time, we can be critical of the Jewish establishment for doing a really bad job at educating the next generation. But at the same time, it's difficult because when you're in a world that
Mm.
is progressive and when you're in trying to educate young kids before the age of 13 with meaningful content, these are real difficult challenges. And unfortunately, we, the Jewish people, have not risen to that occasion so well.
And I would like to add something more,
Mhm.
just because you are from Canada. People say, people are not interested in sophisticated, heavy thing about theology. And I want to remind everyone that Jordan Peterson, filled the biggest theater in Toronto for 2 hours lectures, a series of 2 hours lecture
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
the symbolic meaning of the stories of the Bible. There is a true hunger for meaning
Yeah.
these
Hmm.
days. And if someone, actually believes what he says, and I think Jordan Peterson believes what he says, there is a crowd hungry, to get
Hmm.
those kinds of wisdom. And uh, before the recording, prior to the recording, I told you that Jordan Peterson is a great persona, but I'm very sad that he, as a Christian, has took the role of explaining the stories of the Bible or the philosophical meaning of them, and not a Jewish persona like Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And it should
Yes.
have been us, basically.
100%, 100%. And if it was us, the reason it should have been us is because we can go much deeper. He's Jordan Peterson, and I'm a great fan of his. I went to see him as he filled the Binyanei Ha'umah, the Jewish Jerusalem Convention Center, when he came a couple of years ago. It was brilliant. It was a wonderful experience to see him. At the same time, a non-Jew does not have the Torah in its full scale and scope to be able to get the depth and the meaning that's available. So he's making mistakes, even though even though he's got a lot of accuracy in a lot of his principles of life. But when it comes to the depth of Torah, there is a lot of surprising and amazing, beautiful meaning that the world and the Jewish people need to hear and deserve to hear, but it's not coming across in full. So we need to reclaim that leadership as teachers. That's the idea of Kohanim. We're supposed to be teaching the world.
I want to add that a non-Jew also doesn't have the feeling of guilt that many Jews have.
Hmm.
The persona behind me is the writer Shalom Aleichem. And this says in one of his books, that if a Jewish want to say, this is very serious thing, he said, I heard it from a goy. So there is nothing more,
Yes,
uh, I don't know, good or respectful for Jewish peoples and say,
right,
a
right.
goy did it, a Gentile did it. And I think that the feeling of inferiority is something that we need to take to get rid of. And this is
I'll tell
part
you
of the
100%. And
diaspora.
100%. It is part of the galut mentality, the diaspora mentality. But the same idea is why my book begins with Adolf Hitler, because we believe we will take it's a wild thing. But if I would just start off in the second half of my book and say, let me tell you about who the Jewish people are. We're an amazing people. We were God came to us at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. gave us this mission. We've influenced the world in unbelievable ways, bringing morality and ethics and civilization. We've been impacted. Everyone would be turned off. Nobody would be reading my book. This is the reality. But if I come and say, a non-Jew named Adolf Hitler understood who we were, and this is why he hated us, and then I flip it and say, and actually, there's truth here. Let me tell you about who the Jewish people are. That's the foundation of how the book is built. And I'll tell you another amazing thing. I've been sitting on this book for 35 years since I was at university, and I felt we weren't ready to hear it. We, the Jewish people, were not yet ready to hear. It was too raw to hear. This is why the Holocaust happened. This is why we're hated. I started writing it 4 years ago before October 7th, but I think it was amazing, hashgacha pratit. But after October 7th, the ability of Jews to hear it has been opened because almost every Jew is wondering what is going on? Why do they still hate us so much? Why is it so genocidal? Why is there such double standards? There's something really weird going on, and the typical explanations just don't satisfy. So when we come in with a deep and spiritual explanation, they get it. And I'm just laughing. I was saying when Christians hear this message, they go, "Of course, Rabbi. It's obvious. You're the chosen people. Of course, everyone hates you. You know, Jews, with Jews, we got to take them through this
Yes.
path and all the winding road till we get to the end." And they go, that's interesting. Non-Jews, it's just boom. Yes, of course.
And now we talked about anti-Semitism, but we didn't talk about what can we do differently. Now, in a recent JNS conference, Malcolm Homeline, arguably the most senior representative of the Jewish civil society in America, said that over $100 million are invested in efforts against anti-Semitism. Now, that's a tremendous amount of money. Now, we can say that there is something wrong in this industry of anti-Semitism, that they're not going to solve the problem that they want to solve. So, in your opinion, what are they doing wrong? Because they have a lot of money and they don't manage
Yeah.
to.
Yes, it's a very good question. $100 million is a lot of philanthropic dollars going into this fight every year to fight anti-Semitism. I was at that JNS Jewish News Syndicate conference. I was actually on the panel with Malcolm at that time. Um, a lot of people compare anti-Semitism to a disease, a virus. Sometimes they say it's a shape-shifting virus, to which they finish the sentence and move on and say as if it's an unknowable virus. My point is we Jewish people, we need to be doctors. And if we believe that anti-Semitism is a virus, well, what do you do if you're a doctor and someone has a virus? You try to figure out what's the cause of the virus, that you can solve the problem. You don't just accept it. And so the Jewish people have not put their finger on the source, on the cause, the real cause of anti-Semitism. And as a result, it's very difficult to be an effective doctor and solve the problem. So the $100 million is it. Everybody's just flailing away, saying maybe if I do a Super Bowl commercial, that's where $2 million went. That's where $2 million of the 100 million, right? If I do a Super Bowl commercial and talk about tolerance, to talk about anti-Semitism, that was 2 years ago, maybe that will reduce anti-Semitism. And then he was told, oh, that was too Jewish. So this last year, he spent the $2 million on another Super Bowl ad which didn't mention Jews so much, because it was too much. Maybe that'll stop anti-Semitism. So we are flailing away. And frankly, our institutions that are supposed to be addressing the issue, like the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and they've missed the point so often about what the real threats are facing the Jewish people. And as a result, it's a very ineffective use of philanthropic funds, even though it comes from a good place. There's a sense of urgency. My argument is that we need to put our finger on what the real reason is for anti-Semitism. And if
What
we
would
do,
you
we
do? What would you do with $100 million minus the $2 million of the Super Bowl commercial?
what I would do with that money is to educate the Jewish people about who we are, because I believe that it is a spiritual phenomena. If Judaism, if anti-Semitism, if Jew hatred is a spiritual phenomena, then we don't solve it by creating another Holocaust museum. By the way, that's a lot more than $100 million when you
Mm.
start putting the Holocaust museums and everything else into it. And it's not solved by creating a little bit of awareness advertisements that goes out there and say, be tolerant to people. It's not going to solve it. But if the Jewish people will be who we are, if the Jewish people, maybe it won't stop anti-Semitism, but if I can look in the face of anti-Semitism and say, hey, yeah, that's a double standard. The reason they're all calling Israelis genocidal right now and saying we're doing the worst crimes against humanity in Gaza, if I can look at that and say, you know what that is? That's a double standard. That's anti-Semitism, which thank God most Israelis see that, but American Jews not so much. If I can help every young Jew understand that that's a double standard, that's anti-Semitism, and then go further and say, and the reason that this is the only place on earth that those standards are applied is because there's something about you as a Jew that is causing that reaction. And there's actually something very positive about it. And let's turn the thing on its head. That's what I would do. We need to educate our people and inspire them about what is very wonderful about being Jewish.
And I think my last question is regarding our topic up until now. Would you say that your message and education that you try to embrace can resonate with agnostic or atheistic Jews? Also, I can also accept your message even if I don't believe in God?
Well, it's a very good question you're asking, and the way I look at that is I don't know. That's my simple answer to it. But I believe that again, also most agnostic and atheist Jews also don't have much of an education either. If they did, they probably wouldn't be agnostic or atheistic. Um, and this is the way I look at it is through my book, I'm putting it on the table. I'm saying, look, nobody's ever shared with you, this is who we are. This is the mission and the purpose of the Jewish people. And that's a real shame because you've been fed a lot of misconceptions, a lot of, I don't know if it's lies, but certainly misunderstandings. And you might not like this message, you might not accept this message, but here, somebody has given it to you. Try it on, see how you relate to it, respond to it, hate it, like it, love it, embrace it, but at least hear it out and at least someone's told you. You have an opportunity to know what is the core mission. And according to Torah sources, according to Jewish sources, this is who we are. And that's what the service that I wanted to provide in writing the book. Whether it impacts people is also a spiritual matter.
And again, maybe the idea that for uh, that your message might not be coherent without the presence of God is not a bad thing. Yes, you need
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
presence of God, even as a concept, even as an abstract, in order to understand the history of the Jewish people. And I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
this basically summarizes everything. You know, the
Yeah.
Jews, I think Rabbi Manis Friedman says, the Jews have a very strange connection with God. They go to they go to shul on Yom Kippur, but they don't believe. Why do you go to shul on Yom Kippur? The God that I don't believe in told me to go to shul. So in order to be a good Jewish, you don't
Yeah.
have to believe in God. Now, Rabbi Raphael, show first, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and so much knowledge that you shared with us today. Usually I ask, at at the end of the conversation, could you just name one book that you recommend? But you have 15 movies. So if you can
Yeah.
share with us one movies for people who are unfamiliar yet with your work, would it
Hmm.
be Obsession or what is like the, if I need to choose just one film?
Okay, give me two. Give me two.
Okay, take two.
So yeah, the film that I made that made the biggest impact was called Obsession: Radicalism's War Against the West. It came out in 2006, and it was the first film that really showed America the ideology behind radical Islam. Even though they'd already had 9/11, they still didn't appreciate that there was an ideological battle standing behind it all. They thought it was just a bunch of nut jobs. As a result, it was actually 150 million people saw that film, and it was shown prime time, was featured on CNN and Fox. And they could probably see it. I think it might be on Amazon, but certainly if you go to clarionproject.com, you can see it. It might be on YouTube as well. And then but I'm really into half of my films are positive. Half of them deal with anti-Semitism. I made several films about campus anti-Semitism, and
Give
people
me a
all said that I'm
positive. Give me also a positive.
positive. So I made this beautiful film called Beneath the Helmet, which we followed five tzanchanim, five Israeli paratroopers as they became soldiers. That film was beautiful, and it showed the humanity behind the Israeli soldier. This came out about 10 years ago. It was on Netflix for several years. I believe you can still see it on Amazon Prime. And it is a very real and raw picture of the diversity of the Jewish Israeli people and what we stand for and what it's
Mm.
like going into war. So I'm trying to tell the Jewish story in different ways with our media. And of course, I'm very proud now that I've created this book. That's the book I recommend.
Yeah. Always afraid of the big bad Jew, now also in Amazon. And you can see all the links in the description below. Rabbi File Show, thank you so much for your time. It was a marvelous conversation.
It was a pleasure to be here. I enjoyed it very much as well. Thank you. Keep doing
Okay,
what you're
bye.
doing.
Thank you so much again.